I watched from the back pew, my hands clenched so tightly that my nails threatened to break the skin of my palm. The wedding march swelled from the chapel's grand piano, and there they were, my husband, or rather my ex-husband and my best friend, walking down the aisle. Daniel stood tall in his tuxedo, looking as smug as ever, his arm locked with Vanessa's. She wore white, as if she were innocent, as if she hadn't been the one whispering in my ear all these years about how she would never trust men, how she would never betray a friend. The church was filled with their people, our old friends, now his friends, my in-laws, who never quite took to me. No one had noticed me slip in, my presence an uninvited ghost from a life they thought was buried. But what they didn't know, what Daniel didn't know, was that I wasn't just here to watch. I was here to end this. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that drifts by unnoticed until it becomes the day that changes everything. The sky was an unremarkable shade of gray, and my office was alive with the usual chorus of ringing phones and muffled conversations. My inbox was flooded with unread emails, most of which I had every intention of ignoring until after lunch. My to-do list was filled with the kind of tasks that required little thought: buy groceries, pay the internet bill, confirm weekend plans with Vanessa. Then, my phone vibrated. A text notification lit up my screen. Daniel. I reached for it absently, expecting something mundane. A dinner request, maybe a quick check-in about his day. Instead, I read words that would carve themselves into my memory forever. We need to talk. Actually, there's no point. I'm leaving. It's over. I've filed for divorce. I stared at the message, unblinking. It felt like a mistake, a joke, a text meant for someone else. My fingers trembled slightly as I scrolled up, searching for some warning, some clue I had missed. There was nothing. No arguments, no tension that would have hinted at this, just the usual exchange of messages. Last night's simple good night, love you, and his usual early morning have a good day. But this was real. A sharp, sinking nausea curled in my stomach. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. The silence was deafening. Everything around me blurred. The faint click of keyboards, the distant chatter of coworkers, none of it seemed real anymore. My world had narrowed to the glowing screen in my hand and the weight of the words staring back at me. Somewhere in the fog of my mind, denial tried to take hold. This wasn't how marriages ended. There were supposed to be fights, long conversations, doors slammed, accusations thrown. Not this. Not a detached 5-second text message. I forced myself to move, my body feeling sluggish, as if weighed down by the sudden unraveling of my life. My bag was already over my shoulder before I realized I was leaving. I mumbled something to my assistant, Sarah, who gave me a confused glance as I stumbled toward the elevator. By the time I reached the street, cold air slapped against my skin, but it did nothing to shake the dizziness clouding my thoughts. My breaths were shallow, uneven. I walked blindly, feet moving on instinct rather than intention, my mind a chaotic storm of fragmented memories. 6 years. That's how long Daniel and I had been together. Long enough to know the sound of his laughter in the dark, the weight of his arm draped over me in sleep, the way his voice softened when he was about to say something he thought might hurt me. We had built a life brick by brick. The first apartment with the leaky faucet and the too small kitchen. The vacations where we promised we'd always make time for adventure. The nights spent dreaming about the future, houses, promotions, maybe even kids one day. Had it all been a lie? My hands shook as I pulled up our banking app. The thought hadn't even fully formed in my mind before the numbers appeared on the screen. Half of everything was gone. A cold dread settled over me. This wasn't impulsive. Daniel hadn't woken up this morning and decided to leave. He had planned this. He had drained our account, prepared his exit, and sent a text as if I were nothing more than a subscription he was canceling. The nausea returned, sharp and unrelenting. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep walking, to keep breathing. My apartment was only a few blocks away. If I could just make it there, I could think. I could make sense of this. Then my phone vibrated again. A name flashed on the screen. Vanessa. For a second I hesitated. My best friend. The person who knew me better than anyone. The one who had been there through every high and low of my relationship. I swiped to answer, my voice coming out in a strangled whisper. Vanessa. But before I could say anything else, she spoke first. And in that moment, everything, the confusion, the grief, the fragile hope that there was still something left to salvage, shattered completely. Because Vanessa wasn't calling to comfort me. She was calling to confess. And what she said would break me all over again. I should have known. The thought came later, in the quiet space between heartbreak and rage, in the long, sleepless nights where my mind replayed every conversation, every moment, every ignored red flag. But at that moment, standing there, phone pressed to my ear, the weight of my world crumbling beneath me, I knew nothing but raw, unfiltered devastation. Vanessa's voice was hesitant, almost breathless, as if she had just run a marathon. I need to tell you something. My stomach twisted. Something about her tone sent a ripple of unease through me. This wasn't the voice of a best friend rushing in to console me. This was something else. Something I didn't recognize. I swallowed hard. Vanessa, what's going on? Silence. A beat too long. And then, it's Daniel. The world around me stilled. The sounds of the city, the honking of cars, the hum of distant conversations, muffled into nothingness. I felt it before she even said the words, a cold, creeping sickness spreading through my veins. We're together. 2 words, simple, devastating. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. Vanessa had been my best friend for nearly a decade. She had been there for every milestone of my relationship with Daniel, offering advice when we argued, toasting to our anniversaries, standing by my side at our wedding, her hand gripping mine when I said, I do. And now? Now she was telling me that she was with my husband. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mind rebelled against the words, refused to accept them. But Vanessa was still talking, her voice quick and desperate, as if saying it all at once would somehow lessen the impact. It just happened, okay? I swear, we never meant for it to. I hung up. The phone slipped from my fingers, landing uselessly in my bag, but I barely noticed. My hands were numb, my body unsteady as I stumbled toward my apartment building, each step heavier than the last. Inside, the silence was suffocating. The apartment still smelled like Daniel, his cologne, the faint traces of his coffee lingering in the air. His jacket was still draped over the back of the chair, his shoes still lined up neatly by the door. He had left me over text. Had he packed in secret? Slipped out in the early hours of the morning, careful not to wake me? Had he stood in this very spot, looked at these same walls, and felt nothing? A fresh wave of nausea hit. I sank onto the couch, pressing my hands against my temples, as if I could physically hold myself together. But the memories came crashing in, unbidden and merciless. Vanessa, laughing with me over wine on Friday nights, offering advice when Daniel and I had our petty arguments, holding my hand when I cried. Vanessa. Sitting across from me in coffee shops, swearing she would never trust men the way I did, that she would never settle down because she had seen too much betrayal in her life. Vanessa, the woman who had taken my husband. How long had it been going on? I needed to know. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to our last messages. Just last week, she had sent me a text. Vanessa, brunch this Sunday? Mimosas on me. I squeezed my eyes shut, bile rising in my throat. She had planned brunch with me while sleeping with my husband. She had smiled in my face, pretended to be my shoulder to lean on, all while carving a knife deep into my back. I opened my laptop, my fingers moving before my mind could catch up. My hands were still trembling as I pulled up our joint banking account, and there it was. The money was gone. Daniel had siphoned off nearly half of our savings, quietly, methodically. A little here, a little there. Had he started before they got together? Or had Vanessa been in on this from the start? My vision blurred with fury. I forced myself to keep looking, my pulse thudding in my ears. That's when I saw the credit card charges. Dinners at expensive restaurants, boutique hotel stays. One charge stood out, a jewelry store. I exhaled sharply. It wasn't for me. I slammed the laptop shut. My heart was no longer just broken. It was ablaze, fury licking at every raw, wounded part of me. They had taken everything, my husband, my best friend, my security. They had expected me to disappear, to crumble quietly, to step aside while they played out their little fantasy of stolen love. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't going to be the woman people pitied. No. I was going to be the woman they regretted crossing. And so, as I sat in the apartment that Daniel had abandoned, surrounded by the echoes of a life that had been ripped from me, I did the only thing left to do. I stopped crying, and I started planning. The days after the betrayal passed in a haze. Time lost meaning. Morning blurred into afternoon, which faded into endless nights of staring at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled in the wreckage of my life. The first morning after Daniel's text, I woke up expecting it to be a nightmare. For a moment, there was peace. A half second where my brain hadn't yet remembered. Then reality hit. The bed was cold and empty. The closet door hung open, his side nearly bare. The scent of his cologne, once comforting, now turned my stomach. I sat up slowly, my body aching from a night of restless sleep. My phone was on the nightstand, flashing with unread messages. I didn't need to check to know they were from Vanessa. I didn't want to read her apologies. I didn't want to hear how she never meant for this to happen, how she hated hurting me. I already knew everything I needed to. I pulled the blankets around me, the weight of the silence pressing in. The apartment, our apartment, felt like a graveyard of memories. The coffee mug he used every morning sat in the sink. The book he had been reading was still on the nightstand. His forgotten socks peeked out from under the bed, as if he had left in a hurry, as if a part of him still remained. But he wasn't coming back. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, a dull, relentless ache that refused to ease. I had given this man 6 years of my life. I had loved him, trusted him. I had built a future with him in my mind. Holidays, children, growing old together. And in the end, he hadn't even had the decency to look me in the eyes when he left. I tried to eat, but food turned to ash in my mouth. I tried to shower, but the water did nothing to wash away the filth of their deception. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Daniel and Vanessa, whispering in the shadows, laughing at my ignorance. When I couldn't stand the apartment any longer, I went outside. I walked for hours, my feet moving on autopilot, my mind a swirling storm of grief and rage. I passed couples on the sidewalk, holding hands, laughing, oblivious to the destruction that love could bring. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to warn them. Don't trust too much. Don't believe in forever. Don't let your guard down. I walked into a cafe, the same one where Vanessa and I had spent countless afternoons gossiping, sipping overpriced lattes. The barista greeted me with a familiar smile. "Hey, your usual?" I opened my mouth, then hesitated. How many times had I sat here with Vanessa, sharing secrets, venting about life? How many times had she looked me in the eye, pretending she wasn't already sleeping with my husband? The thought made me sick. I turned and walked out without answering. By the third day, the calls from Vanessa stopped. By the fifth, my mother started to worry. "Honey, you need to get up," she said over the phone. "You need to do something. You can't let them win." Let them win. The phrase rattled around in my head long after she hung up. Was that what I was doing? Lying in bed, drowning in my own misery while they went on with their lives? While they planned their wedding, spent my money, moved on? I thought about Vanessa. About the way she had always admired my life, about the way she had once said, "You're so lucky, you know? Daniel is perfect." Had she wanted him even then? Had she been waiting for the perfect moment to slip into my place? Had she won? I sat up, my pulse hammering. My body was weak from days of barely eating, barely functioning, but a new energy surged through me now. No. I refused to be the broken ex-wife, the abandoned friend, the woman everyone whispered about with pity. Daniel and Vanessa had made a mistake. They thought I would disappear quietly. They thought I would be too heartbroken to fight back. They were wrong. I pulled my laptop onto my lap and opened our joint banking account. The numbers stared back at me, confirming what I already knew. Daniel had drained half our savings. He had stolen from me, funding their new life together with money that wasn't his to take. A slow, bitter smile curled at my lips. He thought he had won, but he had forgotten something. The business venture he was so eager to start, the one he had been bragging about for months, the one he had pulled our money into? It was in my name. I clicked through the legal documents, scanning each line, and there it was. Daniel had transferred funds, but the ownership? That was all mine. And that was just the beginning. As I sat there, something shifted inside me. The grief was still there, but it was no longer drowning me. It was fueling me. Daniel had taken everything from me. Now, I was going to take everything from him. Grief had kept me in bed. Anger got me out of it. For days, I had wandered through my own life like a ghost, drowning in heartbreak while Daniel and Vanessa built their new world on the ruins of mine. But something had changed now. The devastation was still there, humming beneath my skin, but it was no longer in control. I was done mourning. They had taken everything from me, my husband, my best friend, my future. But there was one thing they hadn't counted on. I wasn't the kind of woman who stayed broken. And so, on a quiet Sunday morning, with the weight of betrayal still pressing against my ribs, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started planning their downfall. Step 1, the money. Daniel had been smart, but not smart enough. He thought he had cleaned me out, siphoning half our savings and quietly redirecting funds to his new business venture. What he didn't realize was that his entire company, every contract, every intellectual property filing, every legal document, was still in my name. The business hadn't been launched yet. He was still in the investment phase, selling promises and projections to rich men in expensive suits. He needed their money, and I was about to make sure he lost it all. I sent an email to our lawyer. Urgent matter regarding joint assets. That would be the first domino to fall. Then I made a call. Hello, Mr. Latham? Yes, this is regarding the pending investment in Daniel Carter's new firm. I believe there are some legal complications you might want to be aware of before finalizing any agreements. By the time I hung up, I had set something in motion that Daniel wouldn't see coming until it was too late. Step 2. The wedding. It didn't take long to find the details. The invitations had already been sent, the date set for just a few months away. A fast wedding, of course. They wanted to seal the deal before anyone could ask too many questions. I called the venue, pretending to be Vanessa. Hi, I'm calling about my upcoming wedding. I need to make some last-minute changes to our reservation. A little sweet talk, a fabricated emergency, and a well-placed request later, and their non-refundable deposit was officially forfeited. I imagined Vanessa's face when she found out, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Step 3. The truth. They had tried to erase me, to rewrite history so that I never mattered. But people love a scandal, and it was time for the truth to come out. I sent a message to a mutual friend, someone who still pitied me enough to listen. I wasn't going to say anything, but you deserve to know what really happened. I wove the story carefully, feeding just enough details to spark curiosity, just enough truth to ensure that when the rumors started, and they would start, there would be no stopping them. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing with messages. I can't believe Vanessa did that to you. Did Daniel really take your money? You should ruin them. Oh, don't worry. I was just getting started. Step 4. The warning. Vanessa was the weak link. She always had been. Unlike Daniel, who thrived on control, she was ruled by insecurity. She had spent years in my shadow, smiling at me while secretly envying the life I had built. I knew exactly how to get under her skin. I sent a message. Are you sure you really know him? Just that. No explanation, no anger, just enough to plant a seed of doubt. It didn't take long for her to respond. What do you mean? I let her stew in silence. Daniel might have convinced her they were in love, but I knew Vanessa. Deep down, she feared betrayal more than anything, and now that fear had a voice, mine. Step 5. The setup. There was one final move to make. Daniel had always been careful, but he was also arrogant. He thought he was untouchable, that I would just fade away. So I set the perfect trap. I reached out to a journalist, a small local columnist who loved juicy stories. I have a tip for you. A scandal involving a high-profile entrepreneur, fraud, and a stolen fortune. Interested? The reply came within minutes. Tell me everything. By the end of the week, Daniel's name was about to be dragged through the mud, his reputation tarnished before his business could even take off. And as for Vanessa, well, she was about to learn the hard way that stolen love never lasts. The beginning of the end. As I closed my laptop, my hands steady for the first time in weeks, I realized something. I wasn't just taking revenge, I was taking back my life. And Daniel and Vanessa? They had no idea what was coming. Revenge didn't need to be loud. The best kind was subtle. A whisper that turned into an echo, a seed of doubt that grew into destruction. I started small. A carefully placed message to a mutual friend. A casual remark slipped into conversation. It didn't take much. People loved a scandal, and Daniel and Vanessa had handed them one on a silver platter. The rumors spread fast. Did you hear how he left her? Over a text. And with her best friend? The judgment came next, quiet at first, then louder. Friends turned wary. Business associates second-guessed their deals. Then, I planted the final seed. I sent Vanessa a message. Are you sure you really know him? It was just enough. Enough to make her wonder if she had won at all, or if she was simply his next victim. By the time Daniel realized his reputation was unraveling, it was too late. His business deals stalled, investors pulled back, and the wedding whispers turned sour. I didn't need to lift a finger to destroy them. All I had to do was remind the world exactly who they were, and let the truth do the rest. Vanessa's paranoia was growing. She had started questioning Daniel, second-guessing every excuse, every unexplained charge. The whispers I had planted had taken root, twisting their way into her mind, making her see him differently. Meanwhile, Daniel was struggling. His investors were pulling out. The article hinting at fraud had done its job. No one wanted to fund a sinking ship. He was desperate, scrambling to hold things together, too preoccupied to notice Vanessa's growing suspicion. That's when I set the final trap. I sent an anonymous tip to a journalist, a small, local business writer eager for a story. There's more to Daniel Carter's financial dealings than people realize. Look deeper. Then I waited. Within days, another article appeared, this time naming him directly. His past transactions were questioned, his company put under scrutiny. Investors backed away completely. And Vanessa? She was left wondering whether she had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. Their foundation, built on betrayal, was crumbling. And as I watched from a distance, I knew the moment I had been waiting for was near. Daniel and Vanessa were about to implode, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. The day had arrived. The grand wedding Vanessa had dreamed of, the one Daniel had promised her, built on lies, stolen love, and my money. I wasn't on the guest list, but I didn't need an invitation. I arrived just before the ceremony, slipping into the back of the lavishly decorated church. The air was thick with the scent of expensive roses, guests murmuring as they took their seats. Vanessa stood at the altar, radiant in white, oblivious to the storm about to break. The minister's voice rang out, "If anyone has a reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." I stood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's smile faltered. Daniel's face turned to stone. "Oh, don't look so surprised," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "Daniel, did you tell Vanessa about your little financial troubles?" I pulled out the stack of papers, bank statements, fraudulent contracts, proof of his downfall. Vanessa's eyes darted to Daniel. "What is she talking about?" Silence. And then, like clockwork, their perfect wedding came crashing down. And I walked out, victorious. The wedding never happened. Vanessa stormed out of the church, her veil ripped off, her voice shaking with rage. Daniel chased after her, but the damage was done. The guests whispered, unsure whether to stay or leave. By that evening, the scandal had spread. The investors Daniel had been courting officially withdrew. His business, already on the brink, collapsed overnight. With his assets frozen and lawsuits looming, he had nothing left. Vanessa, humiliated and betrayed, disappeared from social media. Friends said she moved in with her sister, refusing to speak to Daniel. Their love, built on lies, had shattered under the weight of its own deception. And me? I received a text from Daniel late that night. "You ruined my life." I stared at the message for a moment before replying. "No, Daniel. You did that all on your own." Then I blocked his number. For the first time in months, I felt free. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. They had tried to destroy me. Instead, I had watched them destroy themselves. And I had never felt stronger. In the weeks that followed, the dust settled. Daniel was drowning in legal battles, Vanessa had vanished into obscurity, and their so-called love story had turned into nothing more than a cautionary tale. As for me, I was finally free. I moved out of the apartment that once held our memories, leaving behind the ghosts of a life that no longer belonged to me. I traveled, reconnected with old friends, and rediscovered the version of myself that had been buried under years of compromise and betrayal. One evening, while sipping wine on a quiet balcony overlooking the city, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I regret everything. Daniel." I stared at the screen, then smiled. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had already won. I deleted the message without responding and turned my phone off. The past was behind me. My future was mine to create. I had been burned, but I had risen from the ashes, stronger than ever. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back.